Anyway, thank you for joining us. I mean, I think this is a very critical piece of starting any cloud implementation. And I think this is a unique opportunity to talk to both practitioners and those in government managing these large implementations. So thank you for coming out tonight. I think the first thing, instead of me introducing each of these speakers, I'd love to hear kind of what you're doing in cloud and cloud governance and management. So if you introduce yourself within that context of what you're doing. So Sonja, and we'll go down.
Hi, my name is Sonja Souders. I'm with Microsoft. For the past couple of years, I've been working on obtaining authorizations to operate within my client. It's a government client. Through that process, we've kind of honed in and figured out how to speed things up a little bit and make things a little bit easier to get to the cloud for them.
Hi, everybody. I'm Bill Meskill, and I work for the Office of the Secretary of Defense for Policy. And our mission is to support the national security objectives, be they geographically situated or topically. So my job is the Director of Enterprise Information Services, otherwise known as a little CIO. I have a petite staff of 30, and probably half of that is dedicated to everything from infrastructure to application support. Governance, well, I guess you could say I'm sort of a minor governor. I report to a lot of different governors. In terms of governance, we follow, of course, direction of the DoD CIO. Most recently, as it applies to this, you know, the DoD CIO has sort of 4 major topic areas right now. I don't know if you're all familiar with those, but you know, he's out there in the press, he's talking about it, and it's cloud, AI, C3, and cybersecurity, sorry. Anyway, so under the cloud, we have a lot of different other kind of governing documents, most recently a 12 August release of the DevSecOps reference design document. So I'd be happy to talk more.
Great.
Hey everybody, my name is Viktar Zherdetski. I'm with Unisys, and I lead our Azure Cloud practice there. So we are managed service providers, so one of our primary tasks is really to make sure that we manage it right. So here's the government's really coming. So how do we, using all these tools that we talked about today, can help our customers to really accelerate their business missions and still do it right? So we don't have budget overspends, unanticipated. We don't have security breaches, and essentially make sure that our clients will not get on the news. All right. So a big thanks to Microsoft team and Jerry. We worked closely with OCP organization, kind of taking all this cool stuff, putting it in our labs, and really figuring out how we can make it all happen and fulfill our clients' requirements at scale.
So OCP is one commercial partner for those who don't know that acronym. Rob?
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, thank you for coming.
So great talk so far, guys, so thank you. My name is Rob. Echo. Hi. Everybody awake? Awesome. My name is Rob Brown. I am the CTO at DHS Component, USCIS. We've actually been in the cloud since maybe 2013 in production, and we have probably close to 85 to 90% of our applications already in the cloud. So that's quite a bit. And we've had a pretty big journey. Today, specifically as it relates to management and governance, we are on a pretty active mission to really become multi-CSP and leverage as many of the services fit for purpose, fit for cost, be more effective and more efficient, and leverage multiple CSPs in that manner as we do refactor our applications from the cloud. So we're, I think, at a journey at CIS where we're already starting to not just from a lift and shift from a data center or from somebody's laptop, but we're actually already refactoring applications in the cloud. And one of our current journeys is to take sort of stovepiped apps and portfolios and different projects that are very sort of system focused or application specific with very siloed out manners of governance, very siloed out cost controls, very siloed out just money and how it's being funded, to take a very holistic approach and applying some frameworks like domain-driven design and building out specific business capabilities and identifying which applications fit into those domains. And part of that refactoring within those domains is, again, a very microservice-driven as well as an event-driven approach architecturally. So we are now at a point in time at CIS where we've actually understand where a lot of these applications fit, as opposed to them, IT group over here is doing 50% of what IT group over here is doing, and starting to refactor again these apps to be very aligned with business and to even start to measure business value and prioritize those applications with a business value metric. So from a governance perspective and just a management perspective, we're sort of in, I think, a new realm of figuring out what that means in the world of microservices and the world of serverless and domain-driven design. It's pretty cool.
Rob, I think you've touched on a couple of things that really is what we're seeing as a trend, which is multi-cloud, which I think that, and then also another thing you mentioned that was interesting is just how you're going about governance. So the question I had for anyone on the panel is, how do you define governance, and how's that different from management? And I would probably add to that, and where do you start?
I guess I'll start.
Sure.
In my opinion, and the way I see it, data governance is the policies or the business procedures, not procedures, but the standards that you have to meet so that you are secure. And the data management would be those tools, those policies, those procedures that you use to ensure that your company is secure, your data is secure, your environment's secure.
And I'll take a little bit of different tact on this question. I define governance and management actually pretty synonymously. And from a Department of Defense approach, and maybe a good many others, I differentiate it in terms of strategic, operational, and tactical. And so when I think about sort of the overall governance umbrella, I'm really talking about like at the strategic definitional level, all the way possibly to operational activities. At the management approach, I talk at basically the operational to tactical level. And so the employment of tools, employment of technologies at that point. At the governance strategic level, defining the overall goals and objectives for our department. The overall goals in possibly acquisition. I'll try to stay away from that topic. Objectives for the department and more so with the federal government as well.
Anyone else?
Sure. So I think about governance. It's really it's our best practices and rules, how we're going to manage the cloud infrastructure in that case. And what we see is really important that when you talk in cloud, you have to think not from one workload perspective. You really have to think holistically, as that's your new virtual data center, right? And you have to have kind of like overall vision, how you're going to handle that from the enterprise perspective, right? What are the exceptions for different departments in your organization, and kind of like start setting up the entire hierarchy, right? And setting up those different requirements. How do you gonna run each of them? You have to think about shared services. So maybe a good analogy, like when the builder starts the new development, You have to put this common infrastructure in place. You have to have your water supply. You have to have your electricity. Absolutely the same is in the cloud. You have to establish this initial landing zone, put the express route in place, put the foundational policies at the top of your account hierarchy, the management groups that we talked about today, right? And then think through what's really important for you. What kind of security and compliance you have to address, right? What's your budgetary constraints? Do you run R&D and you have to have some kind of like protective guardrails on top? Actually, I had a great story when I played with this FedRAMP template that Jerry showed today. I deployed it before the Thanksgiving, and I went on holidays. I forgot about it. What do you think I saw on Monday? Nice bill. Right. So, how do you prevent that? So maybe if you're in R&D, you have to set the smaller budgets and automation that will, if you'll forget something, it will shut it down for you. Stuff like that. And then management is really following your governance and just making it happen. And majority of that is definitely should be automated.
So I actually have this is a story that happened this morning. We came across a team and a group that that we had set up a meeting with to discover that they were using Azure Cloud. Like, wow, OIT. Where are you guys from? Who's your contract with? I had no idea. No one at OIT knew who these folks were, who they were. I came to discover that this was a group that was running in their own Azure Cloud, and we're now ready to go into production. And wanted to understand what those production gates were. So from just a governance perspective, you're absolutely right. You need to have, just think about development. You need to have essentially your CI/CD pipeline, your shared services in place. This group had no idea of even, what GitHub was. Didn't understand what a source code repository from a CIS perspective was. They were using their own. So from a governance perspective, having that in place and then marketing it and having proper onboarding procedures is pretty important for a lot of teams. So, just an example that happened today of helping manage and apply a level of governance to some rogue actors, which is quite interesting.
Let me tag on to that. At a DoD perspective, we have some governing activities that state that we must provide our system into a system of systems. For people, the Defense IT Portfolio Repository, the SNAP IT, which is how much spend you're expending, over your fiscal, your future years defense. FedUp. Anybody happen to throw me a lifeline? Anyway, then going back to the managerial aspect, how much you are expending in your particular individual environments as well. So as like the management tactical level, we are responsible for reporting all of our expenditures, adhering to all the governance activities, making sure that we are depositing our activities into, for the DoD Central Artifact Repository for our code, and then capitalizing on it. And so, if you have people that are unaware that those activities exist, then you will have you will have people that aren't capitalizing on what's come before them.
So I think my next question we already started delving into, which is what are the biggest challenges and I think the flip side of the opportunities in this space around governance and management. I mean, Sonja, I know you're thinking over there, but I know you're doing a lot around ATO. We kind of touched on that. I know that's one of the adoption barriers of getting that compliance piece done. Do you want to start there?
I can. Getting the authorization to operate on the government system is quite challenging sometimes. You have to make sure that you adhere to the NIST 853 Revision 4, along with any directives, handbooks, or any other SOP that that agency has come up with that you have to follow. With a challenge that I had with a customer, a large government customer, I found it was easier to take those directives, handbooks, along with the Azure Blueprint compliance part that's already out there on the web, which you gave a link to, and you mesh the two, and then you have to find out what the monitoring piece that they're using on-prem or in the cloud, or what they're using right there at the time, and meshing that in to make standard operating procedures for that specific project. And if you know anything about the NIST 853 Revision 4, every single security control group starts with like AC1. The first thing that they ask for is a standard operating procedure for that project. To make ATOs easier for my customer, we went ahead and started making templates or for the different platforms, whether it was for IaaS on Microsoft Azure Government or if it was on D365. And you already had those answers. Yes, you would have to tweak it by what that project was using at the time for monitoring, but it expedited getting those documents be able to be signed by the system owner of that project, and then it made it easier to answer all the questions because within the SOP are the answers for those controls. And that means that the system owner reads it. Actually, it goes through several revisions, and you have to work with the team closely between Microsoft and the government partner and make sure everybody's on the same, and they say, yes, this is what we're doing, and that's what they adhere to, and that's how they set their system up. But getting that ahead of time or through the DevOps operation, if the customer decides to go this route, we have to make sure that it's built out that way. So that's why DevOps comes into play with all of this, being able to change that code or to move something to make sure that it adheres to the compliance part along with what the customer wants.
So I appreciate that. Sonja and I were having a similar conversation early on, about an hour ago. I feel like in our implementation, we had nobody out there in EMAS to steal from. So, so we, ended up writing a bunch of plans, of course, aligned to all the controls, and a lot of people were able to plagiarize from us. So and that was good, but it meant we had to do a lot of extra work. What I find continuously challenging right now is the inheritance model aspects of it. Inevitably, and I did it just today, I went into EMAS. I'm the AO for our system. I went into EMAS, I looked at all the controls. Everything that was not green was inherited. There were even a couple of reds, not fun to look at. So, for me, I have to call up the particular person or organization. I'm going to refrain from calling them out and saying, hey, your sub-controls are at a particular green level, but you are not keeping up with your inheritance markings. Sometimes it's just markings. Sometimes I don't even know, right? And so we have to, my team, and I have a couple of team members here, have been making all those calls. And so that's a little bit of a challenge for us.
No, in Microsoft, we're looking at just how do we automate this via Azure Policy and Azure Blueprints. We're going GA, actually, in Azure Government at the end of the year, so that you can see this automated policy all the way to Security Center and monitor those policies. So we're excited about how do we advance and automate as much as we can, and open that up to the broader community to leverage, because I think it benefits all. So Rob and Victor, any thoughts on kind of what our opportunities or challenges are here?
Sure. I think general challenge is keeping balance, right? Because people look into the cloud for this agility and speed of service and self-provisioning, and allowing them to do so with all the guardrails in place, and of course it has to be automated. And by the way, Azure Policy is just a fantastic mechanism for that. We build a lot of kind of like this automated governance based on the policy concept. But this really helps to avoid the situation when we have those shadow IT shops, right? Because essentially what we see over and over again, if people are not allowed to do fast what they need for their business mission, they go waste, right? Right now, anybody can pull off credit card, go, get their own cloud sandbox, and then, of course, forget how to do it right, or just, don't have the right tools, don't really understanding the policy compliance, and then here we go, right? And then we see all these articles in there. So, being able to establish those building blocks like blueprints and policy sets, and again, a lot of stuff right now coming from Microsoft. I know ISO 27001 template is available, FedRAMP is coming. So that will help a lot to solve this problem, right? And really enable this agility with guardrails and therefore reduce all those mistakes and errors.
Yeah, for me, I'm just trying to figure out how I can do this, have something like a blueprint, service maps across GCP, AWS, Azure, X. So do I need to create my own DSL? Do I need to spend a lot of money on a tool? What does that look like? And you're right, from a governance perspective, seen a lot of groups or even attempts to really put a thumb down on consumers of the cloud just to essentially shove them away. So it's a fine balance of innovation and organic growth with certain levels of governance. So and one of the things that we've tried to do, again, provide certain past tool sets as it relates to a good CI/CD environment, but also provide vehicles and mechanisms to organically come up with new tools. What's Fortify stocks or something to that effect. What's a cool tool that can replace that? I'm not saying that Fortify stocks. That's just hypothetical.
I was going to say, come on.
So having abilities for different teams, groups to come up and sort of showcase and test some new technology, and see how that can get adopted into essentially that governance lifecycle is pretty cool. So we're trying to do that as well with. What does that look like from a multi-cloud? How do we leverage some of these past tools that provide that governance that we can actually, essentially have multiple endpoints? So that's interesting for us.
So I want to get to Q&A given the time, but before we do, I want to ask, what's a piece of advice you would give the audience here? Either from a practitioner point of view or from a government point of view, as you start on this journey to set the right governance and management practices in your implementation.
One, I would say don't be afraid to go to the cloud.
Thank you.
Because,
just kidding.
because it's all the tools that you need are actually there, whether or not you know they exist. Mm-hmm. And you can go to any cloud service provider, but I'm going to say go to Microsoft because I'm part of Microsoft. Everybody has their own way of helping you get the governance you need and with different tools. So you need to research. We have, there's war rooms we could do. There's where we come up and we show you a proof of concept. The great thing about the cloud is it allows you to build, destroy, rebuild, change, check all the different types of architecture you want without having to throw a whole bunch of money into it right up front. You get to play in it, figure out what would work for you or your company, and then we will help you and assist you making sure that your governance is covered by asking you the questions. That's what I do. I work with the projects and I ask, hey, is this what you're going to be using for monitoring? Is this what you're going to use? I would suggest using Security Center because it's part of Microsoft and you can use it within the cloud. I would say use cloud tools to monitor rather than on-prem. I mean, it's there. Just don't be afraid to try. What do you have to lose? You might as well try it, right? So that's my bit.
Well, I would just say capitalize on what's available. I felt like we did iterations of growth, and had we been second or third, starting a year later, we could have capitalized on other people's work. And obviously that's sort of the imperative of grabbing images and that have already been secure. I kind of felt we were slow, and that's because we really couldn't cheat off anybody. And I really appreciate what Rob had to say. And there are still people out there that are trying to find their way, that they could have capitalized on what's already out there.
Viktar?
I would say really start with people, right? Knowledge is power. There is no technology problems today that's cannot be solved technologically. We just seen all these tools, but if you don't know what's out there, it's almost impossible to make it happen, right? To make it work for you. And then same with best practices. I think today we kind of like live in an amazing world where all the information is available for you. There is fantastic certification courses from Microsoft and other providers. There are practitioner courses, practitioner certification. So really start making sure that everybody on your cloud team went through the training and got certified. And then the second important thing I think is communication, right? Even if you have your cloud team of fantastic SMEs, but if your entire organization does not know where you're going with the cloud, they don't know who to talk to get my cloud environment, right? According to the governance, you cannot control it. So communication is a key part of that, and everything else will come.
My suggestion is, at least in other government organizations, I'm sure they're still struggling with this, but ensure that your infrastructure, your operators, your developers, make sure that they're all in that same journey. It's very hard, and they're usually in different divisions or different branches of that agency, but if you have that ability to really suggest that up front, make sure you can make it happen. Otherwise, you're still going to be punting stuff over to some team, and you're going to be waiting forever. So make sure that you really, again, back to people, so that absolutely it is people. Make sure that those people are all on the same journey and on the same bus, or otherwise it's going to be a real challenge. The other is definitely have as much tagging as possible, and definitely use serverless, because that can help really do the majority of your governance that you can tweak on a whim.
So Microsoft went on this journey ourselves, and one of our best practices as we went to cloud was we started with some easier apps in the beginning, so that your teams, your DevSecOps teams, they can all understand kind of how to implement all those governance and really have practice on things that are just a little easier, so you can get those wins and milestones of a win up front and easy, and so you gain confidence of that integrated team. So I think that would be the one piece of advice, if especially as you're starting out, get kind of your sea legs going, understand kind of how you operate in a new model, and then in an agile format, just keep going. So with that, I want to open it up to the audience. We have one back here. We've got 2 mics, so happy to.
I think that this is a perfect panel to ask the questions related to the challenges facing when we are adopting cloud solutions, specifically from the service provider perspective. Microsoft. So many years ago, you went to different directions in terms of adopting IPv6. You went to IPv4. You're buying spending hundreds of millions of dollars doing that, and recently changed course. And what is the current status in terms of adopting V6, and what will be the policies in terms of to turn off IPv4, at least internally? And also we have the gentleman from DoD, Bill, and so I think probably one of the reasons why we have the DoD CIO's memo regarding IPv6 earlier this year is because of the challenges you encountered facing the adopting cloud solutions and with specifically related shortage of IPv4 address. So what is the status? Can you make some comments on that?
Specific to IPv6 or what?
Yes, IPv6 adoption.
Well, the funny thing is I don't know if you know that that's the second iteration of that memo.
That's right.
10 years later. So, and I'm not exaggerating. I think it came out in 2008. It came out also from a very similar level individual. It was came out from the Defense Information Systems Agency through the DoD CIO.
This is the one that...
And I know the one that came out last month.
February.
Was it Feb?
February
Okay, fair enough. So, yeah, it's okay. We have our edict, right? And so hopefully the one thing that DoD can do at all times is we salute smartly and we march to those particular dates. The date, I believe, in that one memo is April. Is that correct? April due date. I believe so. So
2 years deadline for all the components within DoD has to make dramatic changes. So this is February 27th. It's public information now. For many months, it was not publicly available, but if you Google it, you will find it.
Roger,
So only easy questions tonight, okay?
I mean, I don't even know actually what the question was right there. Yes, I recognize that there's
So
Mike,
Mike,
IPv6.
I know you do a lot of
edict.
work in here. Is this a question you want to field? That's my Hail Mary over here.
So on the IPv6 question, I worked with several of the federal agencies on the World IPv6 Day, and we actually brought up a whole bunch of the public-facing websites on IPv6, also the SMTP core backbone for .gov and .mil, and monitored all the traffic. And basically all the traffic we saw was just the agencies pinging each other's websites to see whether or not they actually came up on World IPv6 Day. The biggest... on the internal side, the biggest challenge is that you've got a whole lot of legacy systems that don't necessarily support IPv6 and the changes to all the URLs, internal applications. Most of the core routers, most of the core modern operating systems all support IPv6 and in most cases natively have it turned on. And a lot of the corporate commercial organizations and government organizations go through pains to turn it off because they don't want to deal with it internally. On the cloud side, we have enabled most of our properties, but then the government agencies tend to block it. The biggest challenge that we have right now is that the telcos and ISPs are not providing IPv6 connectivity for the last mile to the citizens and the citizen population. Because of that, everyone has to come in through IPv4. And most of the commercial organizations, the commercial websites, don't want to invest the money of doing all the IPv6 work because all the consumers in the world can't get to most sites across the Internet 2 backbone. So it's kind of a chicken and an egg. The telcos don't want to support it to all the edge routers in every one of these homes because they say there's no traffic. And there's no traffic because the people can't get there. Will this be unblocked? Hopefully, yes. Once on the federal government side, they're going to be forcing that onto the federal side and on a lot of the states. They're going to have to turn it on and leave it on, and maybe that will encourage some of the ISPs to turn that on to the end run to people's homes, and so that the people are more inclined to use it.
This is definitely top of mind and part of our conversation. So we are very aware and looking into it.
So I have a question both for Bill and Robert. Bill, you've been here before, and Robert, looks like you're doing great work in the cloud. You guys are, one of the agencies that are leading the way in terms of cloud adoption. My question is, what are the challenges that other agencies? We still see a low adoption. So, you guys are trailblazers, are on the cutting edge. Why are we still seeing a lower adoption? What can we all do as a community, as partners, to get that adoption up there?
Wow. And so I think you heard kind of a resonating theme to my colleagues, from my colleagues to the left. Certainly bringing people up at the same time, that's training. But that's not necessarily training at this particular level. We need to bring cognizance up at a senior level and continue to pound those activities in terms of thoughts. We have the right people in place, I think, that are coming up to speed. We have financial governance that's auditing what's available out there. We have edicts that is forcing applications from traditional on-prem, non-virtual hosting environments to cloud. And of course for the DoD, that's FedRAMP approved, and that's the mill cloud. So I think those impediments are being knocked out by training, by understanding, by promotion at the top level.
I would say that, skills are probably not an issue right now. I think there's especially in this area, market saturation of cloud engineering skills. And when we started in 2014 and even in 2008, and when S3 first was on the market, that was not the case. I think good training is still really critical from an adoption perspective, especially even leapfrogging IAS and going straight to PaaS and taking a more API mindset. I think it would help drive adoption further. But democratizing it to not just engineers but to everybody, I think is probably really the crux here. And having good leadership that actually provides shepherding and stewardship as opposed to just lip service is also really important.
So I think with that, I think that's a great final thought, democratizing this to everybody. And so I think I might have to tweet that out a little later. But anyway, I want to thank all the speakers tonight for contributing your thoughts and ideas. We went a little over, so thank you for your patience, everyone who came tonight. So anyway, with that, I hope everybody joins us September 16th. We're going to talk about data analytics, and we'll have some great folks up there. In the meantime, again, thank you for everybody for joining us. Our hashtags, Azure Gov Meetup, and if you have any ideas, please reach out to us. Thank you.